The mysterious Druids were pivotal figures in the Celtic tribes of Gaul, Britannia, and Ireland. However, with the fall of the Roman Empire, unfortunately, much of what was written about them in ancient times was lost. Some describe the Druids as philosophers, others as magicians or priests. They lived among the Celtic tribes, and quite possibly, their name meant wise men of the oak. They taught a secret wisdom, often connected to trees, with their sacred sites being woodlands in the forests. The Druids' exact roots are uncertain. In his account of the Roman conquest of Gaul, Julius Caesar implied that the Druids' teachings originally came from Britannia, while a Greek scholar asserted that they acquired their knowledge from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. The Druids were split into three main categories: bards, ovates, and druids. The bards were poets, the ovates were soothsayers, and the druids were teachers. This system reflected a society where the oral passing on of knowledge was sacred, and writing down druid teachings was forbidden. During their training, druids memorized extensive amounts of knowledge in verse form, a task that could take up to 20 years, encompassing areas such as theology, astronomy, and divination. Upon completion of their studies, the druids formed a privileged class, tax-free and exempt from military service, and oversaw settling disputes. With regard to their ceremonies, the sources are scant and often unreliable. For instance, the Roman author Pliny described the Druids harvesting mistletoe from oak trees with a golden sickle. Scattered references can be found of Druids partaking in animal or human sacrifices to the gods, but specific details are sparse. The 3rd and 4th century references imply that the Druids continued to live on the Roman conquest, but with a diminished social status. For instance, a 3rd century Druidess worked as an innkeeper. Latin texts from the 1st centuries of the Middle Ages, mostly biographies of saints from the era of Christian conversions, do mention the Druids, but without offering any new information. The oak, a long-lasting and majestic tree, held a special significance in Druidism, reflecting the Druids' awe for nature, and their belief that all forms of life were interconnected. This symbolism implies that the oak was seen as a portal to higher knowledge and the spiritual world, reinforcing the idea that the Druids were the sages of the oak. The Druids believed that every tree contained a spirit, and that some trees, such as the oak, contained special powers. The oak was worshipped for its strength, longevity, and its association with lightning, as it is often struck by lightning. This contributed to the belief that the oak was a bridge between heaven and earth, uniting the physical and spiritual realms. Additionally, the oak was known for its ability to survive and thrive for centuries, representing endurance, stability, and wisdom. Among the best-known rituals surrounding the oak tree was the gathering of the mistletoe, a plant that grew on its branches. The Roman author Pliny depicted the Druids using a golden sickle to collect mistletoe from an oak tree, a ritual that probably had deep significance for life, death, and renewal. Growing between heaven and earth on the sacred tree, mistletoe was seen as a powerful symbol of life and fertility. This reverence was not confined to worship. The Druids researched the properties of trees for medicinal and spiritual purposes, integrating this knowledge into their healing practices and rituals. The Druidic tree cult also placed emphasis on conservation and ecological balance. They understood that the ecosystem's health was essential for the well-being of all living beings, and protecting forests and preserving biodiversity was essential. This ancient wisdom still rings true today, in an era of growing environmental sustainability awareness. Sacred woodlands, where many Druidic rituals took place, were seen as places of great power and wisdom. They were areas where the physical and spiritual worlds interacted, and where the Druids looked for guidance, healing, and knowledge. The Druids held ceremonies in these sacred places to celebrate the changing of the seasons, weddings, and other rites of passage, and divination and meditation practices. The Druid Wheel of Life ritual was a key element in Celtic culture. This cosmogrammatic wheel is split into 8 festivals, marking seasonal changes and major astronomical events, each with its own set of symbolisms and associated deities. These included Samhain, the start of the Celtic year, and the period of deepest darkness, Imbolc, the start of spring; Beltane, a fertility festival; Lughnasadh, a harvest festival; and the solstices and equinoxes, each depicting a crucial point in the relationship between sunlight and the earth. These festivals were not just observations of nature, but also moments when the community could come together, celebrate, and reflect on the seasonal changes and their deeper meanings. Besides the Wheel of Life, the Ogham alphabet, known as the alphabet of the trees, is another key symbolic element in Druidism. Native to ancient Ireland, the Ogham is made up of 20 basic letters called fuse, each representing a specific tree or plant. The Ogham was traditionally engraved in stone or wood, with inscriptions being read from bottom to top in vertical lines. Each Ogham letter is connected to a unique symbolism, including a specific tree, a color, an agricultural tool, and an art. The letter B, for instance, would be associated with the birch tree, signifying new beginnings and rebirth. Ogham practice was rooted in the belief that each tree possessed a unique spirit or energy, and, by connecting with these spirits, Druids could gain unique insights and guidance. The Druids' connection with the natural elements of earth, air, fire, and water is another significant aspect of their rituals. Each was connected to different parts of life and the cosmos. Earth was used to symbolize stability and fertility. Air represented intellect and communication. Fire was connected to energy and transformation. Water represented emotion and intuition. These elements were summoned and honored in many Druidic rituals, establishing a balance and harmony between the human and the natural. Druids also viewed the sun and moon as important energy and wisdom sources. The cycle of the sun, signaling the different stages of the day and the seasons, as well as the cycle of the moon with its phases, were observed and celebrated in specific rituals. These cycles were considered metaphors for the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a central Druid belief. The Druids' demise is inextricably bound up with the spread of the Roman Empire and the ensuing Christianization of Europe. Once the Romans conquered Gaul and Britannia, the Druids started to disappear from classical sources, indicating a sharp deterioration in their influence and presence in civic life. Throughout the Roman occupation, the Druids suffered significant persecution, as their beliefs and practices were seen as a threat to Roman rule and order. With their emphasis on loyalty to the emperor and the Roman gods, they saw Druidism, with its deep sense of connection to the earth and nature, as a form of resistance and rebellion. This led to the severe crackdowns on the Druids, including the banning of their cults and the razing of their sacred sites. The Roman persecution impacted the Druids and their traditions in devastating ways. Many were driven into hiding or forced to adapt to the new cultural and religious order. This marked a significant change in the Druids' role and status in society, from a privileged and respected class to a shadow of their former power and influence. The Christianization of Europe further contributed to Druidism's decline. As Christianity spread, assimilating and replacing pagan religions, many ancient Druidic rituals and practices were either lost or transformed to suit the new dominant faith. At times, Christian saints took the place of pagan figures and deities, and Christian feasts were imposed on ancient Celtic rituals, losing the Druidic oral tradition, a core aspect of their practice and teaching, was particularly detrimental. With no way passing on their knowledge and wisdom through the generations, much of what the Druids knew and did was forgotten or twisted over time. Also, with no written records of Druidic practices, much of their knowledge was inevitably lost after the persecution and conversion to Christianity. Yet, despite these setbacks, the Druid legacy did not disappear entirely. Some elements of their beliefs and practices have remained in the folk traditions, legends, and agricultural practices of Celtic communities. These bits of Druidic lore, albeit scattered and frequently piecemeal, acted as a bridge to a revival of interest in Druidism in later times. The modern revival of Druidism, representing a transition from historical Druidism to a contemporary form, started modestly in the 18th century with the ancient Druid order, the first modern-day Druidic organization, a far cry from the imagery of Druids in white robes at mystic gatherings. The reality was more mundane. A group of men in ordinary robes in a private room of a pub, making the first tentative steps towards a Druidic revival over pints of ale and cider. Some new practitioners of Druidism tried to reform Christianity into a more ecological form, while others rejected it altogether and sought an alternative faith. This latter direction encountered serious legal problems, as the belief in more than one god and the question of the Trinity doctrine were criminal offenses under British law until the beginning of the 19th century. These Druids, with alternative views, had to proceed with caution. This period, however, was highlighted by some surprisingly groundbreaking religious thinking. The main theme of this new spirituality was pantheism, the belief that the universe itself is a living, divine being. This notion profoundly impacted the era, offering an alternative to both religious dogmatism and the emerging materialism. Druidism revival tried to combine the worship of nature with a deep spirituality, reimagining and reconstructing Druidic practices and beliefs in a way that would fit into the contemporary world. During the 19th century, Druidism kept evolving, influencing and being in turn influenced by other spiritual and cultural movements. The Druids engaged in environmental and social issues, seeking ways to bring their principles and beliefs into the emerging industrial society. They advocated nature conservation and examined ways of living in greater harmony with the natural world. Druidism itself witnessed the expansion of its artistic and cultural influence during this period. Many Druids got involved in art, poetry, and music, and used these forms of expression to further explore and impart their values and beliefs. Druidic festivals and gatherings turned into occasions to celebrate nature and spirituality, as well as to reflect on environmental and social issues. Druidism enjoyed an even greater resurgence in the 20th century, with a growing number of people looking for spiritual and philosophical alternatives to traditional religions and secular materialism. New Druidic orders and groups were created, each bringing their own unique interpretation and practice of Druidism. These organizations concentrated on aspects such as spiritual practice, environmental protection, education, and community, mirroring a wide range of interpretations and approaches to Druidism. The revival of Druidism is both a continuation and a reimagining of ancient traditions. While modern Druids may not look exactly like their historical counterparts, they retain the Druid spirit, a profound respect for nature, a quest for wisdom, and a dedication to community and the well-being of the planet.